The signal arrived before its sender existed. Eerie signal predicts names before contact. A cosmic dilemma starts in the cold archive vault, not in a legend. Archivist Vey is doing a job that should be boring. Then the cracked obsidian relic makes the first normal sentence impossible. At the cold archive vault, routine still exists. The first procedure is boring. Photograph the relic, weigh it, stamp the file, close the drawer. Archivist Vey keeps the cracked obsidian relic near the worklight, while archive file A17 waits under one clipped corner. Archivist Vey keeps one hand on one nearby tag, because people trust routine longer than they should. Cold blue light sits on the glass and makes the dust look metallic. From there, Archivist Vey wants to keep the file inside normal chronology. The intake clerk asks to call the board, and Vey tells him the line is dead before checking it. For a few seconds, the practical answer still has a chance. Someone checks the latch, the clock, or the catalog number, and that ordinary check comes back wrong. The argument becomes physical. Vey locks the pressure door with one hand on the red lever. The clerk once, too loudly, then stops when the file prints tomorrow's date. The first useful change is not a theory. The drawer opens an inch after the lock engages. The intake clerk closes one record and keeps one hand over the page. Writing it down would make it harder to undo. By contrast, Archivist Vey makes the kind of choice people defend later. Vey files the relic as recovered instead of received. The clerk pays first. The archive loses tomorrow's measurements before anyone records today's. The clerk holds one hand against the table. The result is already in the room. Under pressure, the clerk tries to make the moment sound procedural. It does not work. The obsidian piece does not move. The room around it changes because the file is not older than the archive. It is waiting for the archive to catch up. The old label stays on one record, and Archivist Vey has to carry it anyway. Past midnight, the clerk now has to live inside the Rasu LT. Nobody gets a speech. They get the drawer, opens an inch after the lock engages. The intake witness tries the ordinary fix first. It is a good instinct, and it fails in a visible way. The failed fix leaves archive file A17 more dangerous than the black relic. After the argument, Archivist Vey stands beside the inner door and counts the ordinary things still working. The light holds. The latch holds. The person across from them does not. The file clerk steps back, then stops pretending the setback is only procedural. The dead probe bay looks manageable at first. The bay smells of coolant and old insulation tape. A silent probe lens stays on the table, close to the probe technician, while the impact telemetry sits beside the nearest hand. The probe technician checks one name under the lamp. The ordinary motion gives everyone one more second. Green diagnostic light pulses across a lens that should be dark. The technician wants to cut the feed before the board can classify it. The technician refuses Vey's order to replay the signal because the lens is reflecting a room behind them. No one panics yet. That would make the problem official. He pulls the data cable out hard enough to bend the pins. The night archivist keeps saying it is a mirror problem until she sees herself missing from the reflection. The room answers with a practical change. The mission wall redraws one route without asking permission. Vey slides one page flat and keeps two fingers on it. The probe tech chooses the practical lie. He keeps the damaged copy in his coat. The cost reaches the night archivist before the report can soften it. The probe bay erases the safest route from the mission wall. The archivist grips one rail. The result is already where everyone can see it. Vey reaches for the safest label. A silent probe lens keeps its place, but the old explanation fails. The lens has photographed the ruin from inside the archive. The old word stays on the page, and the feed technician has to walk it forward. The technician tries to undo the harm by returning to ordinary procedure. The procedure refuses to help. The impact telemetry records the cost anyway. The probe bay erases the safest route from the mission wall. The probe tech has a reason to hide the next detail. That is the human part The choice is not madness, it is pressure. Then the mission wall redraws one route without asking permission, and the pressure becomes public. The night clerk asks for water and nobody answers quickly enough. That pause matters more than another explanation. The feed technician carries the cup over by hand, sets it down, and watches the room make the kindness feel late. The first minute inside the quarantine room is almost dull. The room has 2 chairs, 1 camera, and a checklist taped beside the hatch. The quarantine officer leaves a silver calibration needle where everyone can see it, and the quarantine order stays visible on the table. The quarantine officer sets 1 page beside the light, and nobody moves it. The hatch wheel is warm where nobody touched it. The officer wants 1 clean reason to let the staff leave. The officer argues with the board for 3 minutes while the needle points through the sealed wall. Everyone gives the ordinary explanation, 1 last second. She puts the needle under a glass cup and weighs the cup down with her badge. Vey does not shout. That makes the officer feel worse. After that, the record has a new shape. The camera records an empty chair breathing. The classification board folds 1 sheet and traps it under 1 palm. The lock officer takes the option that can still be explained to a board. She seals the room with Vey still inside. That decision hurts Vey first, and the quarantine order seals a room no one has entered yet. Vey sets 1 cup down without drinking. The result has reached them first. The classification board tries to shrink the damage into paperwork. Nobody has to decorate the moment. A silver calibration needle now means this. The order names the officer as witness 6 hours before she signs it. The old name stays under the clip, but the quarantine chief can no longer trust it. Vey keeps moving because stopping would become an answer. After that, the order names the officer as witness 6 hours before she signs it. The quarantine room gives them 1 quiet minute. Someone checks a latch, a switch, a seal, or a timestamp. The check should end the argument. Instead, the order seals a room no one has entered yet. The next mistake is practical. The officer closes the outer hatch before the count is finished. The board notices, reaches for the handle, and leaves their hand there too long. The moonside dig shelter gives them a normal surface to hold on to. Outside, the dust storm is ordinary enough to be useful. The expedition transcript rests where nobody can pretend not to see it, while the survey lead keeps 1 hand near a bone white map tile. The survey lead counts 3 marks on 1 tag, then stops trusting the count. Dust ticks against the shelter like fingernails on paper. The survey chief wants the find treated as a field error. The field lead orders the courier to bury the tile, and the courier refuses because her name is already scratched into it. The quiet does not feel supernatural. It feels administrative. The courier wraps the tile in her scarf and walks it back through the storm. Her voice on the transcript is steady until the tile repeats her mother's house number. The proof stops being decorative when the transcript adds 1 sentence in the courier's handwriting. The sample courier presses 1 hand over the line nobody wants read aloud. The dig lead picks the answer that protects procedure first. The survey chief reports her missing before she leaves. The result is immediate for the sample courier. The expedition becomes a reply to a file already waiting. The courier puts 1 palm on the glass. The result is already behind it. The field courier says the official sentence first. The evidence is plain enough to hurt. The ruin is not sending a message to Earth. It is answering the archive. The category sits on the paper, while the field lead carries the cost past it. When they leave the moonside dig shelter, the route forward is narrower. The expedition transcript is still visible, a bone-white map tile is still close, and the messenger has paid first. The courier understands the cost before the senior people do. Nobody calls it revelation. They are too busy deciding who has to touch a pale map tile next. Nobody has a speech ready. The field courier wipes dust from 1 sleeve and keeps looking at the floor. The dig lead lowers their voice because the quiet is easier to survive than certainty. Nothing in the catalog mezzanine announces itself as history. The mezzanine is quiet enough that every stamp sounds rude. The sealed drawer tag remains the only thing nobody wants to move, while the chronology correction lies flat in the working light. The catalog supervisor steadies one hand on the desk. Routine holds for another breath. Burnt paper smell climbs through the ladder well. The catalog supervisor wants the drawer deleted from the public index. The supervisor orders the junior analyst to sign a false correction, and the analyst signs it with the wrong hand. The sensible answer is still alive barely. The supervisor burns the duplicate card in an ash tray. The analyst, an apology to the card after it is already ash. What matters is the change left behind. The drawer tag appears on a shelf that had no drawer. The junior analyst moves one chair back and keeps the page in reach. The supervisor does not mean to hurt anyone. The analyst sends the coordinate to the recovery crew anyway. By the time anyone argues motive, the analyst is already carrying the cost. The catalog board loses authority over its own numbering system. The junior clerk watches one light change. The result no longer needs permission. The catalog clerk tries to keep the problem inside the form. The sealed drawer tag becomes harder to touch after that because the archive is no longer preserving the event. It is scheduling it. Across the margin, the old label stays under the catalog supervisor's hand until the hand moves first. The detail is small enough to miss until someone tries to leave. Then the drawer tag appears on a shelf that had no drawer. The chronology correction changes the room's behavior, not just the theory. Nearer the source, the catalog chief moves from the doorway to the table, and the analyst moves back. That small movement tells the truth before anyone says it. For a while, the work becomes ugly and small. Someone labels a bag. Someone checks a switch. The mezzanine supervisor presses a thumb against the table edge until the skin goes pale. The final index room starts with work, not revelation. The last room has no relic display, only cabinets and a desk lamp with a bad switch. Behind that, Archivist Vey works around the cold brass drawer pull because the final access stamp remains close enough to read. Quietly, Archivist Vey keeps one thumb on the form until the paper bends. The lamp clicks off, then the drawer glows from within. Archivist Vey wants to close the file before the archive becomes part of it. The board witness refuses to stamp the closure after seeing tomorrow's dust on his sleeve. Nobody wants to be first to name the wrongness. Vey pulls the drawer open with both hands. The witness backs into a cabinet and apologizes to nobody. The event becomes usable evidence when the second file is already dated tomorrow. The board witness pins one corner down until the paper stops shaking. Archivist Vey makes one useful mistake. Vey reads the coordinate aloud. What follows is not symbolic for the archivist. The final coordinate turns the archive from witness into destination. The board clerk keeps both feet still. The result moves anyway. The last witness wants the report to sound calmer than the room. The category breaks quietly around the cold brass drawer pull. The archive was not chosen because it found the relic. It found the relic because it had already answered. The old word remains on the form, and Archivist Vey has to sign around it. A decision is not bigger. It is meaner. Archivist Vey can protect the report or protect the archivist, and the room has already made both choices expensive. The board clerk reaches for the drawer pull as if it is only evidence. It is heavier than the story anyone wants to tell. By the time the second file is already dated tomorrow, the old version of events is no longer usable. The last witness tries to leave with the first acceptable version. Archivist Vey blocks the doorway, not dramatically, just enough to make the lie wait in the room with them. The clerk asks for one more check because fear sounds better in procedural language. Archivist Vey allows it. The result is worse because the file is not older than the archive. It is waiting for the archive to catch up. A younger clerk drops a pen and apologizes as if that is the problem. The clerk kneels to pick it up, then stays there because standing would make a decision real. Another object will not change anyone. Consequence will. The probe bay erases the safest route from the mission wall. The file clerk reacts first, and that reaction changes what everyone else is allowed to deny. The lock officer holds the table edge, while the classification desk reads the line again. Nobody is enlightened by it. They just understand who has to stay in the quarantine room when the door closes. After the argument, the quarantine chief stands beside the inner door and counts the ordinary things still working. The review board steps back, then stops pretending the setback is only procedural. The messenger steps away from a map tile and still cannot leave it behind. The survey chief places the expedition transcript under the lamp, and the ordinary room stops feeling available. The junior clerk pulls the nearest chair back without sitting down. That tiny retreat matters. It gives the supervisor enough space to make the wrong useful choice. The catalog chief closes the outer hatch before the count is finished. The catalog clerk notices, reaches for the handle, and leaves their hand there too long. Archivist Vey opens the folder, closes it, and opens it again. The second look is worse, because the second record is dated 1 day ahead. The clerk touches the object under glass with 2 fingers, then wipes those fingers on their sleeve. The gesture is small. It is also the first honest vote in the room. Archivist Vey presses a thumb against the table edge until the skin goes pale. Vey sets the impact telemetry beside a silent probe lens and tries to keep both hands flat. The flat hands are a lie. Everyone sees it. The officer crosses the quarantine room too quickly and has to walk back. The quarantine page seals a room no one has entered yet. Vey kneels to pick it up, then stays there because standing would make a decision real. The courier drops the first explanation before anyone orders them to. A white tile sits there with enough weight to make obedience look childish. The mezzanine supervisor presses the seal down and waits for it to cool. It does not cool. The weight gives the analyst time to understand the archive is no longer preserving the event. It is scheduling it. After the argument, the supervisor stands beside the inner door and counts the ordinary things still working. The junior clerk steps back, then stops pretending the setback is only procedural. The archivist carries the final access stamp across the room like it might spill. By the time it reaches the table, the board clerk has already lost the cleaner version. The final image is simple. Archivist Vey remains in the final index room with the brass handle close enough to touch. The archive does not solve the file. It proves the file was opened before the event it records. The new file is marked with tomorrow's date. Then the archive sealed the chart and opened a second file